Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Seeking Truth podcast. Today we have a very special guest. We have Claire Roberts here with us today, who is joining us from Gold Coast, Australia. And she is on the podcast today because we are talking about some really special topics, some really deep and meaningful topics, talking all about grief, talking all about suffering, and talking all about the goodness of God's love and the goodness of God's grace all through that. So welcome, Claire. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting.
Yeah,
it's always good.
Tell us a fun fact about yourself so that the listeners can get to know you a little bit better.
Fun fact, I'm petrified of birds to the point, this sounds really horrible, but I will let them die if they're in my care. I can't be near them. I can't handle it, and I can't do eyeliner. So as a woman, that's probably really shameful. Yeah, I can't. I've tried. I look like a clown, so I give up. I'm not doing it. And I literally now, I'm giving you 3 fun facts. I basically have 1.5 eyebrows because this one started to fall out. I don't know why. It just started last year. Yeah. It just all the hair gets dry. And I went to the doctor, and they're like, "It's called getting old." I'm like, wonderful. So excited about that. Yeah. So now this is like a full eyebrow, and this is kind of like just a half one. So I can't tint it or anything anymore because otherwise it'll look like 1.5. Not that you can really see my eyebrows, but
that's terrible. There you go. Lots of fun facts. Lots of fun facts. You're a bit of a creative person as well. You are writing, and you're got a beautiful Instagram account. So you're obviously a very creative person as well.
Yeah, never thought I was, but yeah, in the recent years, I thought if you were creative, you had to be this wild, amazing artist that had different colored hair. And I think we kind of picture an artist, but I was like, no, an artist can still be structured and still be planned and all those sorts of things. It's just being creative, and whatever you do, I think, is the key.
That's it. God's a creative God, and who are we to put creativity in a box and say this is creative and this is not?
Yeah.
We all have a part of us that is creative. We just express it in different ways.
Yeah. So it took me a while to figure that out, but I was like, you can have lists, and you can plan and have deadlines and still be creative and free. So I think that's the key.
I love that. It's so good.
Well,
thank you so much for coming on here today and being open and willing to share your story, because your story is just I think really powerful and really impactful, and I think a lot of people will benefit from hearing someone who's gone through so many different things that other people have gone through as well, and just hearing about how you've kind of processed that and come out the other side. So thank you so much.
That's all right. Yeah, wherever you want to pick out or pull apart or start. But it's been a big story, and it kind of, it's hard to know where it all finishes and starts, but hopefully it all just comes together and blesses someone. And that's why God asked me to share my story for so long, and I was like, no, it's just a mess. Why would you want, and then he just said, just share it. And then when I finally did, it was kind of like, how do I share the enormity of what this all is, and what do you give preference to or priority to? So I'm still trying to figure all that out, but I think each season, even if it's only been a short period of time compared to one of the others I've been through, still have something and a bit of gold in there. So that's we've all gone through pain, we've all gone through trauma, and if we haven't, we will. So we'll all go through it, and just having to navigate our way through it is not always easy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, let's start back at the beginning. Where's the beginning for you? Have you always been a Christian, or?
I was a Christian. I was a Christian from the age of 9. I think. Is that how old you are when you're in grade 3? I don't know.
Yeah, around that.
About that. So my parents divorced when I was 6, and then I was always in my mum's care. Saw my dad kind of every second weekend, but lived with my mum. And then we moved down to the Gold Coast because she tried to get away from my dad because we lived at Brisbane. He followed, so that backfired on her. Good for me, because a daughter, I think, always needs both their parents in some capacity, however that can happen. And that moment really proved that he loved me. And I think as a young girl, that spoke volumes that your father will chase after you.
Yeah.
And then at primary school, we used to have our RE teachers come on a Thursday, or religious education, if people don't know what that is. So they would come every Thursday, and I just fell in love with this older South African couple. I just feel like, these people are like my grandparents that I never really had. And so every Thursday I was just hook, line and sinker, all theirs. And I just remember I went home to my mum one day and I said, Mum, I think we should go to Pastor Gerald and Sandra's church. And she's like, okay. Little did I know she'd done church prior to my mum and dad breaking up. So they'd done a missions trip to Papua New Guinea. They were on the Billy Graham prayer line. They'd always been in church. My nana is a very, very dedicated Baptist. So church was all part of it. I just didn't know it because it wasn't part of my world once I was born. And so once we went back, we never left, and it became the family that Mum and I never really had. And so from that moment, that's when I became a Christian, I suppose, and I got baptised really young. And I've been in church ever since, but I have definitely not done the Christian life in some of those years. Like when I was a teenager, went to parties, drank too much, went for the older guys, wore the skirts that were too short, did all the things. But I think, as much as you're going to go, I wish I didn't do it, I'm glad I did too, because you often go, well, if I just run away from God, maybe it'll be better. But I've tasted that side and it's no better. So it kind of answers that question to go, there's no fruit in that. There's no fulfillment. It's good in the time, but there's nothing that lasts. But I would say from early 20s was when I really kind of hooked in and was like, all right, let's get serious. And you had to make decisions for yourself. So I wasn't going because Mum or anyone else. This was, do I want to keep doing this for me?
Was it always easy? Like, was your journey with faith always something that came easy for you?
To be connected, I would say. I think there's a difference to saying yes to God and being connected to church. So it's always been easy to be connected to church because it's had family and relationship that I haven't had. And I still live quite a solitary life. So my husband is a FIFO worker and he's gone for at least a week at a time, which is fine. But we've been doing that for 14 years. And I was an only child for a long time till my dad had children in his second marriage. So a lot of my life has been solitary. So being connected to church has always been easy because it's like, oh, well, that's my family. It's like, well, that's just what you do. Family lunch on a Sunday or serving was fine. But my faith, that has been not as easy to hold on to because I'm like, I can see him working for others, but why wasn't he working in my mind and my perspective for me? So that's taken quite a few hits. And he's been very patient, but I have definitely kicked and screamed and thrown many a tantrums and definitely thought that he's got it wrong. And I've got a few bruises from those wrestling matches. So connected to church, easy. Connected to God, even connected to God is easy, but holding on to the faith that he's got me has not been so easy, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of people like resonate with. It's like, oh yeah, I believe God is good and I believe he can do miracles. I just don't believe he wants to do them in my life, And so we then slip back into that works-based mode of like, I just have to do everything in my strength because, God's good, but I've still got to figure it all out myself, So I definitely
100%.
Yeah, you're not alone. I'm like that as well. Like, you do see other people get miracles or you do see other people get things that you want and you're like, when is it my turn? When I've been praying for that too, God, when's my, thing coming?
Yeah, you're like, I've got the number. You're at the deli line at Woolworths and you're like, I've got the number.
Why am I still waiting? Yeah. And that can be really challenging because it talks about in the Bible how, ask and you will receive, seek and you'll find. And you're like, well, I'm seeking and I'm asking, but I'm not finding and I'm not receiving. And that can be a really big wrestle to kind of process that and cope with that, So why don't we start talking about some of those challenges and like some of those things that you've gone through that's caused you to wrestle with that faith?
Yeah. It's probably easier to go to the start. So as I said, Mum and I were on our own for most of my childhood. So, but the hardest part with being with my mum is that she had mental, I won't say mental issues, but she had mental illness that has run through my whole side of my mum's side of the family. Yeah. So the same week that my parents divorced or separated, around that kind of time, but my first auntie committed suicide. So that was my mum's sister, and that was all around the same time. So my mum, who suffered from postnatal depression from having me, and in the 80s, no one knew what that was. They just were like, you're crazy, like, just be happy. It's fine. So there was no support. There was, take a drug, this might make you feel happy. Unknowingly, that was the start of her demise. Because instead of being given the proper tools to deal with it, and there is a time and place for medications, please, if anyone is listening to this and thinking I'm discrediting it, I'm not, but it's not the answer to everything. I think it can help heal for a certain period of time in a transition, but for my mum it became, well, that's what I'm going to use every day to get better. So you put in a woman who's lost her sister to suicide, a woman who was already not balanced with her emotions, and she's lost her husband, she's now a single mum, all this sort of stuff, it all just spiraled. So and then I was taken away just so that she could kind of heal for a bit, and I was with family and did all that sort of stuff. But when we came back together, that's probably when it all got really hard, because it was like the two of us were put together and neither of us knew what to do. We were like, okay, well, you don't know how to be an adult and I don't know how to be a child. And we kind of swapped roles essentially. But yeah, my mum, she had kind of this beautiful, amazing, charismatic side that was engaging and generous and warm, and you wanted to be around her all the time. And that's my biggest fear, is that people, especially if they read my book, think that she was not that, because it's hard to capture that beautiful light. And she was so much fun and we would laugh, but she also had the weight of depression and postnatal depression and just grief in general. I think you lose your sister that way, especially. You lose a husband, you lose your idea of a family. And when we reconnected, I took over the role of being the one that looked after her, and she then kind of just sat into that role and let who could look after her do that. It was hard. So that's kind of where it all started, and it had to be I had to tell her story to tell mine, because it was so intertwined. And that's where I didn't know grief, but I saw what it was doing to someone. And then as we got older, and that grief started then to creep into my world, and I started to be like, well, why am I different? Why is my mum different? Why do we not have enough money? Why is everything a struggle? Why is this happening? And it wasn't really till I was like 16 that it kind of just hit me. And then I thought, well, can't control how sad or happy my mum is. I can't control the dynamics of what's happening with that whole family thing. I can't control anything. I can't seem to control whatever's happening in life. So I am going to control my weight. And I just took it on that. And I just, you lose a bit of weight when you're young and you have a flu or the cold. And that's how it all started. I was just like, lost 2 kilos or something. And then I was like, maybe I am fat. Maybe I am this. Maybe I am worthless. Maybe I don't have any value. Maybe that's why dad left. That's why mum's sick. Maybe that's why, and the enemy had a field day. Like, little did I know then, I kind of look back and it's like, that's what Eve must have felt like when he just whispered a little, nothing was like blatant, like it wasn't this massive breakup or anything. It was just kind of these little, every day, just a little, hey, you're worthless. Hey, because you're too much work, or whatever it was. Some of it had nothing to do with weight, but it was just, that's what I could control. So I took it and I ran with it, and I became severely anorexic to the point they're like, Claire, your heart will stop. And so that is really where it all started in my teens. And I think it just kind of compounding and going. And then I thought that was the end of it. And little did I know, no, that was not the end of it. So, I might just take a breath for a minute.
Yeah. Wow. Like, I think so many people can relate to those little voices. And like you said, it's not, if it was like a really big singular one-time harsh voice, we would be able to dismiss it and say, go away. But it's when it's small and it's little and it's just planting those seeds of doubt every day and it's really consistent, that's when it really just starts to eat away at us, and we do start to believe the lies as our truth. Well, yeah, maybe I am ugly because look at all of these facts, and maybe I am worthless because why else would my parents split up, and why else will my mum be depressed? So you start to look for the evidence that aligns with the lie and then start to believe the lie as truth. And that can be really, really hard to then break out of that when that's what you've believed for the last 20 years, so.
When you say you look for the evidence to support the lie, because you do, because you're like, you don't, I think we spend so much time doing exactly that. We go and find the evidence to support the lie, but we don't spend as much energy to find the evidence to break the lie.
Yeah.
We don't go, hang on, that is a lie, and I'm going to show you why that's a lie. And even if it's just to ourselves, and you may not be even a Christian to anyone that's listening to this, but we spend so much time going this and that, and you might not have a Bible to reference to yet, and maybe you haven't started that journey, and that's going to be on, however life looks for you. But there will be evidence and truth in your life that still says you're beautiful, you're worthy, you're capable. And I took that my parents making their decisions was my fault, but that's the consequence of their choices. They were their choices. And sometimes there's consequences to it, and I don't think they ever meant to. I know that they loved and do love me incredibly. Yeah. They were just going through their own pain. But when you're looking at it from that perspective, all you see is, well, this must be all my fault. And, and you don't realise, even when you get to 50, 60, 40, you can't control pretty much anything. Like, I still don't have much control over much now. So not much is different. I just deal with it differently, but I definitely had to go through some more seasons before I realised that.
Yeah. And those more seasons, were they like reinforcing those old patterns of belief? Like, did it just keep pounding on each other?
Yeah, and that's why it was important to, when I tell my story, to tell the foundation of it, because it just kept building on that. Because after I was healed quite quickly from anorexia, which was a miracle in itself, and it's beautiful. And then shortly after, my mum moved to America. And even though we'd been alone, we'd never been separate. So that was really different. And she had become my purpose. So I was like, well, I live so you can live. But I was also her purpose. It was quite unhealthy for both of us, because she loved me so much, but to the point where I was like, Mum, you need to go find another reason to take a breath every day. So when she went to America, it was actually a really big blessing. Not at the time, but it started to go, okay, well, you need to now start to live for you and figure out how that looks. And I need to live for me. But that was really hard, because, again, it spoke to the abandonment, like being abandoned. It spoke to the rejection. It spoke to all of that stuff. But then it also spoke on the flip side to, oh, I'm free. Okay, I can do what I want, when I want. So that's probably when I was like, I'm going to party and I'm going to do all the things that I don't care if there's consequences, or which is all justifiable. It doesn't mean you should do it. But Mum was over there for about 10 years, I think. So I got to visit her quite a bit. The last time I'd seen her and she was here, we had a conversation, and she just said to me, Claire, I need to shake these medications out of my body. I need to finally get off them. I said, well, Mum, for my whole life, I've never known you not to be medicated. Like, I've never known what that's like. So we had this really big chat, and she said, when I go back to America, I'm going to detox. So that was her plan. But as she detoxed, it was getting worse, and they thought she actually had a brain tumor at one point and having leg tremors, and she couldn't sleep. And so I had said to my dad, who I was working for at the time, I'm going to go to America. I'm just going to go earlier, and I don't know how long I'm going to be there. I have to figure out what's happening. The morning I decided that I was going to book a ticket, and my then husband was a boyfriend, I came to work, and my dad came, and he told me that she made the choice to take her life. So I missed the chance to do that. And I just remember sitting there thinking, like, it was just, but everything was so quick, because within 24 hours we're on a plane, we're going to America. I went straight to my nana's house, because it's the second daughter. She's now lost to suicide. And at the age of 26, I lost my mum, and I'm never angry about it because I know the pain she went through. But it's just sad. That's the only way. And that's where it took me a long time to actually get angry enough about pain to go, I'm sick of it taking people's lives. Like, it took hers, it took my auntie's. I've seen it rob the joy of so many people, and it's taken mine over the years. And I'm just like, it's enough. Like, when do we get to a point where we go enough? I had always been inbuilt just to keep going. That's just what you do. And then, probably about the halfway mark, about 5 years in, I just went, I can't pretend like this is okay anymore. And so it all came flooding back, whether it was all the feelings that I went through when I was anorexic or all the feelings of childhood and all that. And I honestly thought, okay, well, I think that's a lot. I think that's, most people have kind of dealt with one thing. I've now done 2 or 3. And then we decided we want to try for a baby. Little did we know, then that started a whole new season. So that then went into 10 years of hoping, praying, I don't know, all of it. And again, all the foundations and the lies and all that stuff just came back again, because it was like a daily taunt going, see, he's still not listening. See, he still doesn't love you. See, you're still rejected. See, you're still not enough. You'll still be forgotten. So that last 10 years has been really hard. And I never thought, we talk about, especially fertility, and there's normally always a baby at the end of it. And people are like, yeah, we waited or we tried but we've got this. But what happens when you don't get that? Like, we are one of the 1% that the story never really finished. So it finished, but our basket's empty, and we're living with an unanswered prayer, and our life will always be an unanswered prayer in that regard. And that's really hard, because even if you read the Bible, they generally, the story of Job, it still there's a happy ending. Story of David, there's a happy ending. There's Moses, his mum puts the basket in the Nile, she gets him back. There's all these, Sarah, she finally gets pregnant. There's Esther, she saves her people. There's always these happy endings, but what happens when there's not? Yeah. And it's like, how do you then live in that unfilled space? And that's kind of where I'm at now. And there have been many times that I've been like, well, God, you're just useless, because, it was like, and put in the mix in there, slot in somewhere in there 5 years of a business I did for the first time, and it just failed miserably and cost us a lot of money, and I made some really stupid mistakes. And again, I was like, you can't even bless a business, like you can't even. So it's kind of always been that theme in my life, like, why does everything have to be hard? When is it our time? Yeah. So it's just been, and that's where it's been hard to tell my story, because there's just so many like parts that are so dramatically different but so intertwined. But that, God is good, because you can talk about, I can talk about it now, and I'm not completely broken, and I can do it without the tears and all those sorts of things. But I have soaked the pages of my journals with tears, and my shirts and my pillows. So, it is. There's no time frame in pain, I think, but there gets a point where we go, when's enough? Like,
especially when it's one thing after another, and you feel like you can't catch your breath. When is at least one positive thing going to happen? Like, I can't imagine. Well, I can imagine, because I've experienced it on a very small scale, of when one thing after another just happens, you just feel so defeated, just like, well, nothing I do is going to be good enough anyway, so why even bother trying,
why bother praying, holding on, whatever.
So I can't even imagine then the depth of that feeling for you after having such big things happen back to back to back. And like you said, struggling with that, well, how come in the Bible, like, they get the good ending and I don't? How have you kind of processed all this stuff now that you've had a little bit of space to look back, or are you still in the middle of processing it? Like, what does that look like for you?
I'm still a little bit, I think I'll always be a little bit in it. I just think I will. It's in my, I think, and I wrote about it in a blog post, not a blog post, on my Instagram the other day, that the biggest effect that pain and grief has had, or trauma in my life, is that it's left me scared to dream. Like, it's left me scared to be like the saying, what if I fly? I'm like, yeah, but you'll fall. Like, when you crash, it's going to hurt. Like, my brain just goes, yeah, but when you fall.
Yeah.
And I think that makes God sad too, because he never wanted us to be like that. But that is the lasting effects for me, that, but what if this doesn't work? Or what if this is another prayer that I pray so often that doesn't have a different ending to it? But in that, it's not what dictates me anymore. It's just something I'm aware of. So the way I've done it is I've always journaled, always have. And when I write birthday cards and greeting cards, they're always, I've got to find the one with the biggest space in it, because I've always got something to write. So, and everyone's like, you make me cry. And I'm like, I don't mean to, but I never recognized that was a gift until probably in the last couple of years. And so, but for me, journaling has been the safe place to wrestle God in, because it's like, it always feels like a psalm, in the sense that if you read the Psalms really carefully, it always starts with sometimes accusing God, like that he's not there. And when you look at David's life, you can kind of understand why, but he's like, God, my enemies are surrounding me, people are attacking me, I'm defeated, I've got no breath left in me. But it always swings back around to, but you're good, but you're kind. Yeah. And there's something, I think, and that's when Holy Spirit is there, because it brings it, it's like, bring all the dirt up, and then that's kind of leaves, and then all this goodness just flows up, and you're like, that's a reminder that I am loved. I don't understand it, but I am loved. And getting to know God's nature was really part of healing for me, because when you don't know him, you just think I used to think he was a genie in a bottle, or like a dictator on a chair that you went up to and you're like, excuse me, can I have a prayer answered, and then run away. When I understood relationship, and saw him as a father and all those sorts of things, everything's changed, but it was very slowly. And finding the safe people to wrestle with was really important for me, because if you don't wrestle with the right people, they'll either be like, yeah, throw another punch, yeah, or they'll be like, they'll like hold your punch back and go, just think about this for a minute. And then they release it. And then if you want to throw that punch, you can go for it. But it's like they just kind of give you, I'm not saying don't, because that's got to be your choice. And I'm not saying I won't love you if you throw it, but just think about it for a minute. Yeah. So learning to wrestle with the right people, and especially through the fertility stuff, real friends that have been there have just listened to the same conversation, the same words, they've caught the same tears, and they've never gone, it's time to get over it, Claire, or suck it up, or I'm bored of this. They just went, this pain is marinating in your heart, but there will be a point where it comes out, and we'll be there to catch it and take it away for you. And that's kind of why I think God kept asking me to write the book, but I know I've written it at the right time, because now I'm ready to say it from a point where it sounds really harsh and like I don't care and that your pain doesn't matter, but there has to come a point where you go, enough. And that you just have to believe that God is good. And there were days I'm like, I don't believe it, but I believe it. I don't believe. You just had to just keep, because it's like eventually you'll get it. It's because the brain and the heart are not always, and the spirit are not always connecting. So it's like you need to just keep reminding your mind sometimes. Yeah, and reading the Bible, and they sound all so cliche, but it's so important to just, and I tell people, just sit in the Psalms. If you need to do that for like 10 years, sit in the Psalms, because you will find so much comfort in that. And then you'll find this, because there's a tone in David's voice where he's like, enough. All right. My God's good. Life is not good, but my God is good. I'm going to get on with it. I've stuffed up, but I'm forgiven. And so we either sit in this, I'm nothing, or I'm nothing, but I'm forgiven, and yet he's still given me everything. So whatever he's given me, I'm going to run with it now. And I'm sick of giving it over to the enemy. But that's probably how I have done it. And then writing my book was incredibly, it just brought all those little hidden things that I thought I dealt with up. And then it helped me find my purpose. But it's still hard, like this business, I thought God asked me to do it. It'd be raging. It'd be amazing. I'd have some more money in the bank account and things, but I've sat there and gone, God, you asked me to do this and there's not a single sale that's coming through for weeks. I don't understand. So I'm still that girl that sits there and goes, I don't get it. But I choose to hold on because what's the other option?
How did you switch those thoughts from that negative mindset of like, this is horrible, life is horrible, this sucks, like nothing can go good? How did you, like you said, that you came to a point where you're like, okay, enough, I need to start flipping it to the positive. How did you do that? How do you break those thoughts? Because I know a lot of people, like, they do struggle with depression even though they're Christians, and they do struggle with anxiety even though they're Christians, or doubt, and they want to believe that God's good. They want to believe he's there for him, but they really struggle to break those thoughts. What did you do in that situation?
I've always been really careful what I listen to, and I've always been aware that words are really powerful. And I suppose I was fortunate in the sense that I saw my mum deteriorate, is probably the best word, over a really long period. And then my other auntie, so my nana had 3 girls, my other auntie committed suicide last year, and I watched her really deteriorate, but in a really severe way. And I would walk away from there and I would listen to the words that they spoke. And my nana was always praying and she's always been really staunch. But I listened to my auntie and I thought, you're not speaking anything over yourself. That's reminding you of your worth. And I remember at school I used to be, people were like, I'm sick. Don't say you're sick. Like, don't say that. You do all that sort of stuff.
Cliche Christian thing.
Don't say you're sick because otherwise you'll be sick.
Speak that into your life. Yeah.
And then you're like, I speak of meat pie into my life at lunch, all that stupid stuff. But I think God, and that's where I can't deny he's not real, because some of this stuff I never purposely did. Like he just kind of, he brought it to the surface and gave me thoughts and ideas where I went, okay, I'm going to do that. But in the practical way, I listened to playlists. Like I just got on Spotify and I just listened to playlists just in my car, at home, going to sleep.
Like Christian playlists?
Yeah, Christian ones. I was really, because I've seen 3 women take their life, and I've seen that that's the alternative if you don't do something. Then I went, well, I don't want to do that. Like as much as I haven't wanted to live, and I've obviously gone through days where I've definitely thought about driving into the pole that I've gone, or all those sorts of things. You can't not. It's a gene in my mum's family. It's come all the way through from my great-grandmother. So I have to be, and he has protected me out of, like, it's just mind-boggling that what they have experienced has never touched me. But again, being in the right church and getting around the right people, I have had so much prayer, people that have just broken soul ties and all those sorts of things. So I would definitely say get involved with a church with people that are really, that can be your strength when you don't have it. So there were people that were praying for me when I didn't know what to pray.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I'm a bit of a talker. I'm obviously a writer. I could go for hours about things. I just had to find people that I could just continually unravel in. But you have to be smart about where you go for that. Because if you go to a friend that's just gonna, like when you break up with a boyfriend and all they do is, yeah, I thought he was crap too, and all that sort of stuff, it doesn't help you. So if they're like, yeah, you're justified in treating everyone badly because you're in pain, you're justified for hating God, if they keep justifying the bad behaviour,
it's not growing.
Yeah, then you will just keep doing that. And I remember at Colour, before I wrote my book, and we were at the fertility section where Bobby does it, and crying my eyes out, and I was like, God, why not me? And he just spoke to me so lovingly but sternly and said, this is not a new pain. This is not new. And you have a choice to be responsible for it and with it from this point. You can choose to chuck a tantrum every single day if you want, and you can do it and you're justified to do it. Or each day, just a little bit, you can do a little bit better. You can forgive a little bit more. You can love a little bit better. You can read the Bible, one more verse. Like if all you can do right now, and I've been there where I've only read one verse, is like tomorrow do two.
Yeah.
Like there comes a point where you honestly just have to go, I don't want this life anymore, and I don't know how to get out of it. I've never really heard God, and it's so hard to know which way do you want me to go, what do I do, all that sort of stuff. But when I write, I'll look back and be like, oh, I didn't
write that.
I didn't. And some people will do it and they pray or they talk or whatever it is, they will do that. For me, it's writing. So honestly, if it's just talking into your phone when you're walking around the house, do it. Like, do whatever you need to do, because as long as it sits in here, it will just continue to grow and take up space. So you have to just release it. And that's the most beautiful thing, again, about Psalms and even Job, that he just kept unloading to God, like just went, here it is. So how do you reconcile a good God with bad stuff? It's in your heart. It's really just got to be in your heart. It's a personal relationship with him. It's being smart. Listen to playlists. Like, let those words be your words. Let those words be your prayers. Ask for prayer. Get it, get vulnerable. Walk out when no one else is walking out to the altar and just going, God, like, how bad do you not want the pain? It gets to that point where you're like, how bad do I not want this anymore? Yeah. And when you don't want it that badly, you'll start putting action to it.
Yeah.
You've really just got to do the hard work, and it's repetitive. It really is. I have forgiven and done all that stuff time and time again. And it's okay if pain hurts again. I think that's what we think when you deal with pain or grief. It's done, see you later. And when it comes back to the surface, it's almost like the enemy's like, see, you're not healed. See, you haven't done it. See, you're not that great. But stuff happens to make you go, oh, that's not healed yet. All right. And I think God allows pain to come to show us where we still need to go, God, I need help with that. He doesn't cause pain, but I think he allows it for his good in that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like what you said before as well about admitting it to ourselves, like I think that is so important, because we know from psychology, like I love psychology, I love researching it, but we know from psychology that if you don't process your emotions, they will sit in your body, like they will sit in your subconscious. And like you've said, something else will happen that will just re-trigger all of those old memories. And if there's still pain attached to those memories and there's still raw emotion attached to them, all of that is now brought up with this new memory, right? So you've got now a memory that has like double the layer of pain. And then again, if we don't process that, we just shove that down into a box, then another memory will trigger it. And now there's like 3 times, and if we don't take the time to actually admit to ourselves, this is how I'm feeling, this is the pain I'm feeling, and really just grieve and let our body process what we've gone through, think those uncomfortable thoughts, because by thinking those uncomfortable thoughts, that's how you heal your mind and heal and those wounds, it's really important. And I can understand, because sometimes I'm the same, like, oh, let's just put that in a box, that's really uncomfortable to think about, but it festers in your body. It's like a weight, and you just feel so much light when you just release that, and you're like, oh, like, you know what, I've processed it. Yes, it's happened. Yes, it's not a great situation, but I've come to a point of acceptance about that now.
There's a point, like in my book, I broke it up into the 5 stages, because I think that is pain and grief and trauma. And the first part is, it's just the valley of dried bones, because that's just what it feels like. And there's 2 chapters in there. One's called It's Time to Be Honest. And you need to get honest. And the other one, It's Not Fair. And I open with, it's probably not. It's probably, none of this is fair. But then once you kind of get past that and you're like, that's okay, they're just dried bones. Okay, I don't love it, I didn't want it. And then you can kind of go in, then you can believe you're loved, then you can go into your new season, then you can start to be courageous, and then you can move into your promised life. But your promised life will still have pain. I can guarantee you there'll be something in there that will be painful.
Nothing's perfect on earth.
Oh, and look, you know what? And then that's why I kind of did it that way, because you'll probably have to go back again. And in the promised life, there's chapters that are like, it's okay to hope again. It's okay to pray again. It's okay to receive again, because we think, oh, we've healed from, like, okay, I've grieved mum. Yeah, but every Mother's Day, I'm reminded that she's not here. Every birthday I'm reminded she's not here. When I went shopping for my wedding dress, she wasn't here. Every day over the 10-year battle to be a mum, she wasn't there to have a coffee with and cry with, you know. When I do something like when I published my book, I was like, she wasn't here to tell, you know, or when I made my first candle and it worked, I'm like, oh, she wasn't here. And they're all the little times that, again, you grieve. And it's not the same as the first time you heard those words, but it's still grief. And so I think we need to be kind to ourselves. And when I say that you need to talk to the right people, I just really felt to say, make sure you talk to the people above, not below. Like if you're dealing with some pain, you can have a friendship, but if you're looking for someone to help literally bring you up out of it, they have to be above you. It has to be someone who's like not in it at the same understanding. Like sometimes I'm like, how do we have our, you know, how is life bad and a good God? I had to go above someone that knew. And so that's really vital as well. And you have to talk, if you're a Christian and you're doing a Christian walk, you have to talk to Christians. It's just, you can't talk to people who go to the universe for answers and that's their journey, or Buddha or anyone. You have to be very mindful that it's got to be the same information, because otherwise the enemy is just going to be like, well, tick, tick, maybe what you're believing is wrong. Maybe you don't need more maybes. You don't need any of that stuff when you're dealing through all of this. Doesn't mean you can't see and watch, but when you're going to be raw and unfold, you have to make a choice. Am I doing it this way or am I doing it this way? And I tried to do it that way for a while and it didn't work and all the rest of it. So now I do it this way and I'm unapologetic about it. It's probably harder, but it's got more fruit to it. And I know that it's more beneficial and long-term, it'll open a door. And that's when you know you can do your pain, because he's going ahead of me and he's going ahead of every other person. So the days I walk into, they may be difficult, but I won't be destroyed in them. So that's the difference. Yeah, and that's kind of why I did.
Yeah, that's really powerful. The days might be difficult, but I won't be destroyed in them. That's so good.
Yeah, and I think that's where, I hope that's where he gave me the gift of the candles and so forth, so that when people do look at them and they see a candle, just the word brave or hope or loved or promises, that it invokes God's own whisper into them. But I just hope that people that are listening to this aren't like, oh, well, she's all together, so it's easy for her. Man, there are days I have 20 cents in the bank account still, you know, and I'm still yelling at God going, I'm 40, I've lost a mother, I have no children, I have a bunch of unanswered prayers behind me, business is hard. When is the waterfall going to come? Like, when is it going to happen? And I sit here in the house and I still spend half a year alone, you know, and there are very, very dark days. And sometimes I just sit in it and I just go, okay, God, I don't get it. Like, pain is real, and just because you see someone smiling and laughing doesn't mean that it's all together. And so just lean into him. That's all. He is there, you know, and I've seen him as I look back. I don't see him in it, but you'll see him. Like, if you look now, you'll see him last week, that he was there, and you're like, and let that be the strength as to how you do this week.
Yeah, that's so good. Final question.
Go.
How did you feel brave enough to dream again? Like, how did you get out of that rut of it's not worth trying, to actually push through those anxieties and dream and start to pursue those dreams again?
Great question. With a whole lot of fear, but I love that God was so tender and he didn't show me everything. He just said, just write. That's all he asked me to do, was write. I could have wrote a book, I reckon, that had 10 pages in it, and he would have been happy. And he would have said, that's all. I just wanted you to write. And so I said, no. And then I finally said yes. And I started to write.
But not for me.
And then COVID happened. Don't we love that? And I had 9 weeks at home by myself. And I was like, well, all right.
So you did there, God.
Because I think everything else has cost me something, if that makes sense. It's either been financially, it's cost us something. And I've always had to work in order to do whatever I've wanted to do on the side. It's cost me my heart. you know, all that sort of stuff. But this didn't cost me anything. It was just sit with me and write. And I think that's when you know God's in it, because there comes a point where there's a peace and anointing, and it's not easy, but there's an ease to it. And so he said, just write. And so I did. And I just wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And then and by the end of 9 weeks, I had this book, and I was like, oh, okay. And then my natural brain was like, I need to publish it. I need to make money. I need to rah. But God kept delaying them. They were like, we don't have time to read it. We don't have. And so, you know, it took 3 years to write, but it's taken like 2 years to come to life, because the delay, which is, I think, God going, it's not about, and my husband's been amazing, because he said, Claire, it's all just about one life. If you can save one woman from making the decision that your mum or your other 2 aunties made, just by your story, then that's worth selling 1 million books. Like, this has never been about money. And so then that took the pressure. But, you know, it would be much easier just to make candles or just write a book. That was easy. But when God said, do it this way, I think the time, as much as I cursed it, was a blessing too, because slowly I was like, oh, okay, maybe I could sell a book. Maybe I could sell 1 candle. So everything just came down a notch, and I just made it all about just doing one, doing one, doing one.
Yeah.
Which isn't that Jesus? He went back for the one. Yeah. You know, like, that's his heart. So we get consumed with, oh, but I've got to sell. And I'd love this to be a financial amazing blessing in my life. But if it's not, God's kind of gone, that's okay too. Like, you know, we're the ones that put the expectation of what it should be. He's never said, Claire, I need you to sell 20,000 copies of the book. Yeah. And that hit me really hard. He was like, I've never asked you to sell 1 copy. Yeah. All I asked was to write the book. That's all I asked.
And then we add all these like, oh, well, like, obviously I'm going to make all this money from it. And like, that's my expectation. And God's like, no. It's like what your husband said. Like, maybe I've just put it out there just to say one person.
And I may never meet them. You know what I mean? And then that one person may be the one that goes and saves 1 million people. But they needed my story in order to be that one to do.
Yeah, that's it.
And so I'm always, when I'm like stressed or I'm like, I don't want to dream or whatever, God's like, I asked you to write. Or I just asked you to use words to be a connection from me to them. That's all I asked you to do. I'll take care of the rest. And so I kind of go, oh, okay, all right, this doesn't have to look like I think it looks. And I just keep going back to that. And so that has helped me dream. And just also revisiting some of my old thought patterns, going, Claire, that didn't serve you well last time you went down that rabbit hole. Yeah. You spent 2 years thinking that you were broken, or you were worthless, or you compared yourself against every other Instagram account or whatever it was. Where did that get you? It didn't get you very far. So how about you do the opposite? And so I kind of give myself those pep talks and go, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And sometimes I just check out, because I go, you know what? God's kind of big enough. He's got this. Like, if he's got me this far, and I look at, if I haven't taken my life or lost my life, and I should have, 100%. Okay, maybe he's there. Maybe he is a shield. Maybe his protection is there. Maybe, and that you know, in everyone's life, there will be one thing that you'll go, that's God. Like, you'll get to a point where people can give you all the theology in the world, but you know in your heart, it's real. And that's all you need. Once you know that, everything else kind of, it will always just go back to that. So I'm like, I don't understand, but I know he's real.
Yeah, definitely.
So it just becomes so black and white. But it doesn't mean the wrestling stops. And I think that's okay. People need to know it's okay to wrestle. But keep wrestling. Like, there's a point where you can tap out. So tap out.
Yeah. And it's just being obedient in those small things, like you said. Like, he just asked you to just start writing. He never gave you, I want you to write this many pages. And it's being obedient in those small things, and you just watch it become bigger and bigger and bigger by the grace of God, you know, and it grows into something you never would have imagined it to be. Like, I'm sure when you first sat down to write, you never would have thought, okay, so it's going to make candles, and it's going to make a published book, and it's going to have a business, and like it was just being obedient with that small first nudge. And I think, you know, there are people out there that, you know, oh, I'm not good at anything, like, I can't hear God talk to me about anything. Like, I think it's helpful to just kind of sit and be comfortable in who you are. And like what you said about writing your cards to people, you never recognized that it was a gift. It didn't mean that it wasn't in your life. You just didn't recognize it. And it was just all of these alignments of like, hey, words. Oh, hang on, maybe I'm good at words, you know? And I truly believe there is not a single person on this earth that does not have a natural gifting for something. Like God is a creative God. He has planted something in everyone that can be used for good. And if you're listening to this and you're struggling with like, I'm not good at anything, God doesn't ask me to do anything and I have no purpose, like, I just want to say that's a massive lie, because you are so valuable. And just like what Claire said, like sometimes we don't recognize our own gifts, but other people can recognize it in us. And it's just, I guess, having that confidence in yourself to say, maybe I'm not confident in my gift, but I'm confident in the people telling me that it is a gift, you know?
Yeah, and write it down to remind yourself.
Yeah.
People say I'm a good encourager. People say I, make a good coffee. People say I mother well. People say I'm a good studier, or I'm a good planner, or they're all gifts. And whatever pain you've been gone through, he'll use, if you let him, it'll actually be the best blessing in your life, because it'll shape and change your relationship with him and go to depths that you would never had, takes a while to figure it out. But 100%, everything you said. Yeah.
So good. Oh, thank you so much for coming here and sharing your story. Like, there's so much depth to everything that you've shared. And I think that people can pull something from all of your story or a part of your story. Like, there's just so much to it. And thank you for being so open and vulnerable about sharing such really deeply personal things with us.
No, that's fine. And, always, if anyone's got any questions or whatever, just send me a message. I can only give you my story and my hope, but sometimes you just need to reach out, and I can, pray or just give you a little heart and say you're seen and you're loved. So, never be a stranger, never be alone.
That's it. Yeah. So your book is, what's it called? When's it coming out?
It's called Standing Well. And then it comes out March 21st. And so it's paperback or ebook.
Yeah.
And and there'll be a devotional that follows in hopefully 8 to 12 weeks after. So that was really important to me to do a devotional with the book. Beautiful. So then you didn't just read my story, but it started your own story being told and shaped and formed, and your journey with God taking place. So that will
be perfect.
Coming. Yeah, so that is happening. And then a whole bunch of other works, but again, trying to just
secrets.
Slow down a bit.
Where can they find you? What's your social medias? Where can they find you and follow you?
You can find me on everything Words by Claire Roberts, CLAIRE, the French way. And my website's the same, wordsbyclaireroberts.com, and that's where you'll see all my candles and books and resources and blogs and photos and whatever else is there.
Lots of things. Go follow her. Claire is a genuine human being, guys. Like, you're just a genuine person. I don't know. I just feel so much love from you, and we've only ever met virtually. So
I know.
Whoever's blessed enough to know her in real life.
Well, thank you so much. And
thank you.
Blesses everyone.
I hope everyone has a great week. I hope this has encouraged you, and we'll see you on our next podcast. Bye.